Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video, we've got another news and rumor video here to discuss. In today's video, we're looking at some signings, some injury updates, some pieces of news, and we've got some trade rumors involving the Sharks, the Blues, the Senators, and the Philadelphia Flyers. We'll touch on all these coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. Now once again, if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below, don't forget to comment, don't forget to subscribe, tell all your friends. Best hockey content on YouTube is right here at the End-to-End Hockey channel, so if you haven't already, leave a subscribe. We're trying to hit 750 subscribers in the very near future, and I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts down in the comment section below. Also, don't forget to stay tuned for more videos coming on in the very near future. We should hopefully have a couple live streams over the next couple of days. Once again, it will depend on my Wi-Fi, and I've got a couple of errands to run, but we're going to try and do Game 6 of Knights Ducks at 7:30 p.m. Mountain Time tomorrow. And then I'm going to try and do Game 6 of the Wild Avalanche series, if there is a Game 6, on Friday at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. So we'll see how that goes. If I can't do one of those two, maybe we'll do it on the weekend. We'll see. But we're going to try and do those two games over the next 2 days. So very interesting to note there. And stay tuned for more videos coming out in the very near future. Now, in today's video, we have another news and rumor video here to discuss. So we got 3 signings here to start off with. 3 very interesting signings I want to touch on here with you guys here today. So first, Charlie Serrato, who's a forward, 21 years old, has signed a 3-year ELC with the Carolina Hurricanes with an AAV of $915,000. I think it begins at the start of next year. So not a bad pickup here for the Carolina Hurricanes getting Serrato. He was a 2025 second-round pick, so a second-round pick from just this past year. Really good stuff there for the Hurricanes. He was playing over in the NCAA this past year, putting up 7 goals and 27 points in 23 games. I think Serrato eventually could be a really solid third-liner, maybe eventually a second-liner, so not a bad pickup here. And ELC handed out to a pretty decent prospect from a draft pick that was just this past year, so very interesting to note there, but the Hurricanes did sign Serrato. They also signed another player, and this one was an extension. Mark Jankowski, who's in a 2-year contract with the AAV of $800,000, was a pending UFA, 31-year-old center, really solid fourth-liner, has wound up signing a contract extension in Carolina. It gets a 2-year contract extension with an AAV of $1.85 million. So this isn't a half-bad contract, just a tiny bit more than $1 million pay bump from his current contract. It's a 2-year deal. Jankowski's worked out quite good for the Hurricanes this past year, putting up 11 goals and 21 points in 69 games. Really serviceable fourth liner, spare forward, sort of like a 12th, 13th forward, something like that. So like a $1.85 million for a decent fourth liner, it's not a terrible contract. I do think this is going to age pretty well for Jankowski, and if it doesn't work out well, that contract's almost all variable into the minors. So very interesting to note there, but this isn't a bad pickup here in my opinion. Decent fourth liner, just under $2 million. That's not a bad deal. So really good stuff there for the Hurricanes. And then we also saw a massive signing with one of the bigger UFAs that was heading to the UFA market, and that is Charlie Coyle in Columbus. Coyle, who's 34 years old, center right winger, was on an expiring deal, end of a 6-year contract with the AAV of $5.25 million. Wound up getting another 6-year extension with the AAV of $6 million. So that's a very interesting pickup here for the Jackets. Now, I don't like the term 6 years. He's already 34 years old. That's going to take him until he's 40, and the only 2 years that he has no trade protection in the last years of that contract. So I don't like that contract from a term basis. Like I think a 2, 3, maybe even a 4-year deal would have been better. But $6 million, I mean, it's just a slight bit bump of an increase in pay. Like he had $5.25 million this past year, so it's only a $750,000 pay bump. So that's not anything too surprising. Coyle's a really good player. He's been very fantastic over the past couple of years. And this year, he put up 20 goals and 58 points in 82 games, which is really close to career highs. So, like, I'm not too upset with the money given out on this contract. $6 million was what I was expecting to get Coyle after the season he's had. But once again, I just don't like the term. I thought 3 or 4 year deal would have been a lot more better than a 6-year deal that takes him until he's 40. So once again, it's not a great contract in my opinion with the term, but once again, Coyle fit in great with the Columbus Blue Jackets. So at least for the next 2, maybe 3 years, this isn't going to be a bad deal in my opinion for the Blue Jackets. So a very interesting note there, but Coyle to sign a 6-year deal with an AAV of $6 million. So very interesting to note there. But those are the 3 signings we saw from over the past couple of days. Next, going over to a couple of injury updates. So when it comes to some injury updates, we got a couple of things to talk about here. So first, Sam Carrick, who missed 15 straight games with an arm injury, was able to make his playoff debut for the Buffalo Sabres in Game 3 for Buffalo. He was taken out of the lineup for last night's game against Game 4. I'm not sure if that was injury-related or just being a scratch, but Sam Kirk was able to at least get back into game action, which is a huge boost there for Buffalo. Kiviranta, who missed 5 games with an undisclosed injury, returning Game 4, and Josh Manson, who hadn't played since April 23rd due to an upper body injury, returned to game action on Monday. So really good boost there for the Avalanche to get both Manson and Kiviranta back into the lineup in that last Game 5 for the Avalanche. Well, bad news for the Avalanche is that Sam Malinski and Artturi Lehkonen both missed Game 4s due to upper body injuries and are out day-to-day. We'll see if they are able to play later tonight, but some bad blows there for the Avalanche as Lehkonen and Malinski are currently injured. Joel Eriksson and Jonas Brodin did not travel with the Wild and will both miss Game 5 with their respective injuries. So not great news there for the Wild on the brink of elimination. They're going to be still without their top-line center and one of their best defensemen. Cam York was suffering a fractured rib in the second round, and Christian Dvorak suffered a separated shoulder in the second round series. So York played through the fractured rib and Dvorak played through the separated shoulder, but those are some bad blows to Philadelphia Flyers forwards. Owen Tippett also missed the entirety of round 2 due to the fact that he was dealing with a sports hernia that actually caused internal bleeding. So not great news there for the Philadelphia Flyers, and that is the entire reason as to why Tippett never saw second round action. He was out with the sports hernia, so that's not great news there for the Flyers. And Rodrigo Abols, who missed, I think, the entirety of the second half of the season after the Olympics, had to have surgery on his lower body injury, which is why he's missed so much time. So very interesting to note there, but those are some of the Flyers injury updates after their season came to an end. Then Mark Stone left Game 3 for the Vegas Golden Knights with a lower body injury and didn't play in Game 4 or Game 5. That is a terrible blow there for the Golden Knights. They were able to get the Game 5 win last night without Stone, but he's a huge piece. So we'll see if he is able to get back and entering Game 6. And then Jeremy Lauzon, who missed 4 straight games with upper body injury, continued to miss game action and missed last night's game in Game 5 for the Vegas Golden Knights. So Knights are still without one of their decent third-pair defensemen, as Lauzon is currently injured. So very interesting to note there. But some interesting injury updates from our past couple of days with Philadelphia, Vegas, and other teams. Next, going over to a couple of recalls and reassignments. Not a ton of stuff here to talk about. When it comes to some recalls, HN was recalled by the Colorado Avalanche with the injury to Malinski. Just wanted to add some added forward depth, or defensive depth, mind you, so they called it HN. And then the Habs were able to recall 4 players from the AHL affiliates, including Engstrom, Reinbacher, Florian Xhekaj, and Owen Beck, just to provide some added forward and defensive depth on the team. So some really interesting pickups here for the Habs and the Avalanche. Well, Ben Danforth in the Toronto Maple Leafs organization had his OHL season come to an end, so he was reassigned from the OHL to the AHL. So very interesting note there, but Danforth is now going to get some AHL playing time with the Toronto Marlies. So very interesting to note there. Those are all of the recalls and reassignments from our past couple of days. And next, going over to a couple of very interesting pieces of news. We got a lot of things to talk about here. I'm going to just try and get through these quickly. So first, some recent reports came out saying that Pittsburgh is most likely not going to bring back Kevin Hayes. Not surprising, in my opinion. Pittsburgh's trying to start getting younger now. Hayes is starting to get up there in age. He was a healthy scratch at various points this year for the Pittsburgh Penguins. He suffered with some injuries, so I don't think that's overly surprising. Maybe he does wind up staying on a one-year deal and Pittsburgh tries to circle back around to him, but it seems more and more likely at this point in time that Hayes is going to hit free agency in July, so not too surprising there. Oscar Olsen, a former first-round pick of the Avalanche, has been bouncing around the past couple of years. It sounds like we'll leave the Iowa Wild of the AHL affiliates for Minnesota, and we'll go to the SHL this upcoming season. So it seems like Ollie Olsen will try and go back overseas and go to the SHL, so very interesting to note there. According to some more recent reports from Oilers media, the Oilers are going to try and talk contract extension with 3 penny UFAs, including Connor Ingram, Jason Dickinson, and Connor Murphy. So those are some very interesting ones. Murphy and Dickinson were deadline acquisitions and fit phenomenally, and Ingram wound up taking up the starting role for the Edmonton Oilers in net. Didn't wind up getting them past round 1, but he was a pretty decent guy. And if they add another starter or a tandem goaltender, I could see Ingram be a really solid fit with them. So very interesting note there, but it seems like the Oilers do want to bring back Ingram, Murphy, and Dickinson. According to some other recent stuff that's happened when it comes to potential front office news, Shane Doan and the Toronto Maple Leafs have parted ways. It was a mutual parting, so not too surprising there. There was a lot of talk that Doan was getting interest from some other teams with some potential GM jobs. So he's going to just leave and look for opportunity elsewhere, and the Leafs are not going to have him in the organization anymore. Some more recent reports from Canucks media have said that the Sedin twins are going to get promoted. So very interesting to know. They're good to see that both Sedin twins, who I think were like prospect evaluators or something like that, are going to get more prominent roles in the organization. It could be close to or around to the GM position, so we'll have to wait and see on that. And Birch was hired by the New Jersey Devils to be their new assistant GM, as he was added from the Florida Panthers. So once again, the Panthers just lost Sonny Mehta as the GM to the New Jersey Devils, and now they lose another person off their front office in Birch to be an assistant GM in New Jersey. So very interesting to note there. We did see 3 guys get fined over the past couple of days. That includes Xhekaj, who was fined $3,385,000 for a roughing in Game 3 against the Buffalo Sabres. Malenstein was fined $3,515,000 for goaltending interference in Game 3 against the Montreal Canadiens. And Josh Manson was fined $5,000 for butt-ending with a stick, as he butt-ended the stick into, I think it was Michael McCarron's face in Game 4 for the Colorado Avalanche. So Manson, Xhekaj, and Malenstein were all fined due to incidents that happened in Game 3 for the Habs Sabres series and Game 4 of the Wild Avalanche series. So very interesting to note there. Charlie McAvoy has officially had his hearing be held. We talked about how Greg was suspended a couple of games earlier, last week I think it was. Well, McAvoy has now had his hearing heard from NHL player safety after slashing Zach Benson. So basically at the end of the Bruins-Sabres series, Benson was trying to go for an empty net goal. He took McAvoy down to the ice. It was like a tripping call or something like that, and McAvoy took exception to that. He took both hands on a stick over his head, and swung it on Benson, and that earned him a suspension hearing, and he has now been suspended 6 games for that incident. So the first 6 games of the regular season next year, the Bruins will be without their best defenseman in Charlie McAvoy. So I thought it might have been like 4 or 5 games, so I'm a little bit surprised it got up to 6, but still, that was a pretty bad play from Charlie McAvoy at the end of that Bruins-Sabres series. So very interesting to know there. And then we did get the 3 GM finalists for the GM of the Year award just a couple days ago. And that was Bill Guerin, Chris McFarland, and Pat Verbeek. So Verbeek in Anaheim, McFarland in Colorado, and Guerin in Minnesota were the 3 finalists for the GM of the Year award. So very interesting to note there. Once again, Jim Nill usually wins it. So to see him not be a finalist is a little bit of fresh air. I know there's some people who are a little bit upset that Tulski in Carolina or that Dubas in Pittsburgh were not amongst the guys who wind up being in the finalists, but still very interesting. And I think there's most likely going to be McFarland who wins it, given the fact he built a President's Trophy winning team in Colorado. But I wouldn't be surprised if Guerin or Verbeek were able to get it. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But those are the 3 finalists for the GM of the Year award. So very interesting to know there. But those are all the pieces of news from over the past couple of days. And lastly, here going over to a couple of trade rumors. So going over to a couple of trade rumors, we got a couple of things to talk about here. The first I want to talk about is a trade that was discussed, I think, around the trade deadline between the Ottawa Senators and the St. Louis Blues. Bruce Garrioch was recently mentioning some things involving the Ottawa Senators and what they could potentially do in the offseason, and he did mention that around the trade deadline, the Senators and Blues had some trade discussions around Colton Parayko. He did say that the Senators were kicking tires on potentially trying to add Colton Parayko, so that's very interesting. Garrioch does say that the asking price for Parayko is a first-round pick and a high-level prospect. So once again, there was a lot of rumors that was going to be a first-round pick, as well as I think it was Murtka from the Buffalo Sabres, and that Knicks Sabres Blues deal that would have gotten the Sabres Colton Parayko. Now once again, we don't even know if Parayko would want to go to Ottawa, because he did say that he only wanted to go out west and stay out west, and that's why he nixed the trade to Buffalo. He's got trade protection, so he's got a little bit of a say in what happens. But yeah, that's very interesting. Once again, top-end prospect would probably have to be a guy like Carter Yakimchuk, maybe Logan Hensler. Probably would have to be one of those 2 guys. I don't think there's any other really top-tier prospects in the Ottawa Senators organization. So it'd probably have to be like Yakimchuk or Hensler in the 2027 first-round pick. Once again, it's a possibility. I'm not going to say it's not. And adding a top-4 right-shot defenseman who's a little more of a stable guy, steady guy who can play second-pair minutes, shut down sort of defenseman would be a very very good ad for the Ottawa Senators, but if it came at the expense of Yakimchuk or Hensler, would it make a ton of sense? I'm not exactly sure. And would Parayko accept a trade to Ottawa because he's already nixed a trade to Buffalo and said he wanted to stay west? So very interesting note there. I'm not going to say it's a guarantee that happened, and with Parayko sounding the way he did at the trade deadline, I don't think it would happen, but it's very interesting note there that Ottawa did kick tires on trying to call Parayko, and they're going to be a very interesting team to watch out for this offseason, trying to add another top-end defenseman going into the upcoming season. Next, going over to the San Jose Sharks. We know that this team is looking for defensive help. There's been some talk that they'll go after a Chase Reed or a Carson Karels or a Keem Verhoff with the second overall pick in this upcoming year's draft. And I personally stated my facts that I still think they go after Stenberg, even though they need a defenseman. They could probably use Stenberg, add him to the forward group. That would just add another lethal option to the offensive group, even though it would still leave them with a little bit of a weak blue line. However, Jeff Marek was talking on one of his podcasts recently, and he did mention that if the San Jose Sharks do go forward in Stenberg and they don't go defenseman at 2 overall, he wonders if a guy like William Eklund might be the odd man out and someone the Sharks would be open to trading if it was able to land them a top-end defenseman. So that's very interesting. Eklund's had a pretty good couple of seasons. He's hit around the 40 to 50 point plateau, and like back-to-back, maybe 3 straight seasons. He's a really solid point producer. Now, once again, the Sharks have a ton of forward talent. If they go after Stenberg, you're going to have Celebrini, you're going to have Stenberg, Chernyshov, Toffoli's still there. You've got Will Smith. You've got a whole bunch of other players too. So it's going to be very interesting to see, but I've also mentioned this myself. I think a guy like William Eklund could wind up being a guy who's expendable for the San Jose Sharks. Eklund's going to start a 3-year contract this upcoming summer with an AV of $5.6 million, so he's not overly expensive. He's going to be RFA at the end of that contract. He's had some pretty good seasons over the past couple of years, and he can fit into most teams' top 6. So I could see a lot of teams have some serious interest in William Eklund, and if the Sharks paired William Eklund along with like maybe a first or a second round pick, that could get the Sharks that top-end defensive upgrade that they have been looking for. So we'll have to wait and see on that. No guarantees that is something that happens, but Jeff Marek did mention that if the Sharks do end up going like a Stenberg, let's say, with a second overall pick and still need that defensive help, he wonders if maybe a guy like William Eklund's the guy who's potentially available and expendable for the San Jose Sharks, and I would personally agree. I do think that would be the case for the San Jose Sharks. And lastly here, going over to the Philadelphia Flyers. According to a recent report from Anthony DeMarco, he was talking about the Philadelphia Flyers, and he says that when talking about Matvei Michkov recently, the Philadelphia Flyers said that they were going to be listening on all of their players to potentially have some sort of upgrade to improve their team. And they didn't say that Michkov was an untouchable as they have been in the past couple of years. So is there a possibility we could see a Michkov trade in the offseason? Now, I've seen a couple of people say this. Michkov was scratched twice in the postseason, and his numbers were not overly good in the entirety of the season. The stretch run in Philadelphia to get them to the postseason wasn't actually terrible for Michkov, but like in the playoffs, he had like, I think it was around 12, 13 minutes a night. He was healthy scratched a couple of times. Like it wasn't working out in that Philadelphia Flyers organization. So I'm not going to say it's a guarantee they trade him because he is still a really solid prospect. And if they moved on from him, I think that he could go to another team and score like 40 goals, put up like 60 to 70 points, and be a lethal scorer for another team. It would give him a little more of an opportunity. But once again, him getting scratched, him not doing overly well in the postseason, that's led a lot of people to believe that there's potentiality there for a Michkov trade in the offseason. And DeMarco did say that the Flyers weren't as quick to say that he's an untouchable as they have been in the past couple of years. So we'll have to wait and see what happens here, but I don't think Michkov will get moved because I think he's still going to be a big piece of that Philadelphia Flyers future going forward. But it's an interesting concept, and if the right deal came along, maybe there is a possibility the Flyers would wind up trading Matvei Michkov. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But that's what I want to talk for today. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do the Flyers move Matvei Michkov this offseason after a terrible postseason? Do the Sharks move William Eklund to get that defensive upgrade? And do the Senators and Blues hook up on a deal involving Colton Parayko in the offseason? We'll love to hear your thoughts on all that and all the other news we discussed here down in the comment section below. That's all I want to talk for today. Once again, if you haven't already, leave a like, comment, subscribe, tell all your friends. Best hockey content on YouTube right here at the Into It Hockey channel. We're trying to hit 750 subscribers in the very near future. So if you can, leave a subscribe. It really does help with the channel. Also, don't forget to stay tuned for more live streams coming on in the very near future. Hoping to do one tomorrow, 7:30 p.m. Mountain Time between Knights and Ducks. And then on Friday, if there is one, at 6 p.m. Mountain Time between Avalanche and Wild. So we'll have to wait and see on how those ones go. And on top of that, if you guys really want to support the channel and you like what I do here, head over to my Buy Me a Coffee page. There's a link to it down in the description below. It's just a way for you guys to help support the channel. So if you can make a donation, it really does help. On top of that, don't forget to stay tuned for more videos coming out in the very near future. I do a blog talking about news, rumors, analysis, stuff like that. So check that out. I'll link to that in the description below. And can't wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.